I'm Isabella Miller, 29, and I'm about to see my family for the first time in 5 long years. Tonight, they're gathering at the Grand Bistro, one of the fanciest restaurants in Newport Beach, to celebrate my sister Chloe's engagement. They've always looked down on my career choices, thinking my cooking dreams were beneath our family name. They have no idea how much has changed since I walked away. My stomach tightens as I smooth down my simple black dress. Sometimes, the hardest meetings are with your own past. Growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut meant something very specific in my family. The Millers weren't just rich, we were a legacy. My parents, Eleanor and Robert Miller, built their lives around showing off their status, the right address, the right schools, the right jobs. Our big house hosted fancy parties where my mother would show us kids off like trophies. Her pride grew with how well we fit into her idea of success. The Miller children are meant for great things, she'd tell her friends at garden parties, while my father nodded, sipping his drink. Chloe's already going to Yale Law, and Ethan is so good at math, he'll be a great banker. When guests would ask about me, the middle child, my mother's smile would get a little tighter. Bella has creative ideas. She'll find her way. What she really meant was, I was the family's disappointment. While Chloe was great at debate and Ethan won math contests, I spent hours in our housekeeper Maria's kitchen. Maria, a kind woman from Italy, saw something in me that my parents couldn't, a real passion. "You have the hands for this work," she'd say as I helped her make bread or chop vegetables. "The way you taste, the way you smell, you understand food deeply." By 13, I was making my own recipes. By 16, I was hosting secret dinner parties for my friends when my parents were away. The kitchen became my safe place, where I felt most truly myself. "Cooking is a servant's job," my father declared when I mentioned culinary school in high school. Millers hire chefs, they don't become them. To make them happy, I applied to business schools and ended up at Dartmouth, where my father and grandfather had gone. But even there, I found ways to follow my true passion, taking food science and nutrition classes that I could say were good for business. I started a secret supper club in my apartment, charging students for fancy 5-course meals to pay for my secret weekend workshops with local chefs. My double life continued until graduate school. 6 months into an MBA program that made me very unhappy, Chef Antoine Dubois, a famous French chef with 3 Michelin stars, visited campus for a series of talks. After tasting my food at a university event I had helped cater, he pulled me aside. "Who taught you to make a sauce like this?" he asked, his accent strong, but his eyes serious. "I taught myself," I admitted, "from books, videos, experimenting." He gave me his card. "You are wasting your talent here. Come to my kitchen in New York. I will make you great." That night changed everything. 2 weeks later, I stood in my parents' perfect living room, explaining why I was dropping out of my MBA program to go to culinary school. The silence after my announcement was loud. "This is completely unacceptable," my father finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We've put everything into your education." "Everything except respect for what I actually want," I shot back. My mother's face hardened. "If you do this hobby, you do it without our help, money, or otherwise." Chloe, home from her first year of law school, laughed coldly. "Always the rebel. Let's see how long you last cooking for minimum wage." Ethan, already working at a big finance company, just looked embarrassed for me. I left that night with only my savings and a small suitcase. The next 5 years were harder than anything I'd known. Working 18-hour days, living in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, taking out loans for culinary school. But under Chef Antoine's guidance, I grew. The kitchen's energy, the rules, the creativity, it fed something in me that business school never could. And then came the chance that would change everything. An investor who had tasted my food at one of Antoine's events offered me a business proposal. 2 years ago, the Grand Bistro opened its doors with me as the head chef and part owner. 6 months after that, I bought out my partners to become the sole owner. The funny thing was, I ended up using my business education after all, just not in the way my parents had planned. The Grand Bistro quickly became the hardest reservation to get in the city. Last month, Food and Wine magazine featured us in their Future of American Cuisine issue. Through all of this, I kept my distance from my family. Occasional stiff phone calls with my mother, holiday cards, but nothing real. They knew I was doing something with food, but nothing about my actual success. I kept it that way on purpose. I wanted recognition for my achievements on my own terms, not as a way to finally get their approval. So, when the fancy invitation to Chloe's engagement dinner arrived at my apartment, I was surprised. Even more shocking was the location, my own restaurant. Of course, they couldn't know it was mine. They probably chose it because it was fancy and impressive, perfect for showing off their status. After days of thinking, I decided to go. Not to get their approval, but maybe to finally close a chapter. 5 years of distance had given me perspective. I was secure enough in my success now to face them without falling apart under their judgment. What I hadn't expected was how it would feel to watch them eat in my place, criticizing the very dishes I had poured my heart into creating. But that was exactly what waited for me as I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the Grand Bistro that evening, ready to play the part of the struggling black sheep one last time. The familiar scent of the Grand Bistro wrapped around me as I stepped inside. Saffron, rich wine, the subtle smell of fresh herbs that I insisted on having delivered twice daily. Usually, this smell calmed me, reminded me of everything I'd built. Tonight, it only made my worry worse. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a simple black dress that was actually a designer piece, with a single string of pearls that had belonged to my grandmother. Understated elegance that my status-focused family would likely see as me trying too hard with little money. My hair was pulled back into a neat bun, another detail they would probably think meant I couldn't afford a proper styling. Lucas, my most experienced server, saw me right away. His eyes widened slightly, questioning. I rarely came in through the front as a guest. I gave him a subtle shake of my head and whispered, "Not yet." He nodded quietly and continued his work. From the entrance, I could already see them. They had asked for the center table, of course, and were arranged like a painting of wealth. My mother in designer clothes, my father looking at the wine list with exaggerated focus. Chloe draped in what looked like new season luxury. Next to her sat a man I didn't know, probably Brandon, with slicked back hair and a watch that glittered every time he moved his wrist. Ethan and his wife, Sarah, completed the picture, both in business clothes as if they'd come straight from important meetings. Maria, my hostess, approached with a warm smile. "Good evening, miss." She caught herself just in time. "Your party is already seated. May I show you to their table?" "Thank you, Maria," I mumbled, thankful for her quick thinking. As we walked closer, my mother noticed me first. Her eyes did the quick check I remembered from childhood, a head-to-toe scan that guessed the value of my look and found it lacking. "Bella," she said, rising to air-kiss my cheeks, "you've finally arrived. We were starting to wonder." "I'm exactly on time, Mother," I replied, checking my watch, 7:30 on the dot. My father stood, giving me a stiff hug that ended with an awkward pat on the back. "You look healthy," he offered, which in Miller speak meant I hadn't stayed as thin as they liked in our social circle. Chloe barely bothered to stand, offering her cheek for me to kiss. "This is Brandon," she announced as her fiancé stood and held out his hand. His grip was too firm, a power move I recognized from countless business meetings. Princeton undergrad, Wharton MBA, he introduced himself, just made junior partner at a big bank. No nice to meet you or I've heard about you, just his achievements and status. The Miller family's way of showing affection. Ethan gave me a more real greeting, though his wife Sarah's smile seemed forced. I later learned she had been the one tasked with finding this impressively exclusive restaurant for tonight's dinner, and she was worried if it would meet everyone's standards. "Well," my mother said as I took the last empty seat, "we've already ordered champagne. I hope that's acceptable." I noticed they'd chosen the second most expensive option on our list. Showy, but not crazy. Typical. Around us, the restaurant buzzed with the energy I'd worked so hard to create. The lighting was dim enough for closeness, but bright enough to see the beautiful plating of each dish. The sound level was perfect, balancing conversation and privacy. The tables were spaced just right, close enough to feel lively, far enough apart for private talks. Every detail had been my decision, from the linen to the custom-designed chairs that encouraged diners to stay without getting uncomfortable. I watched the staff's subtle reactions as they realized I was sitting with guests. David, our wine expert, caught my eye as he approached with the champagne. The slightest raise of his eyebrow asked if I wanted him to acknowledge me. I gave an almost invisible shake of my head. "Excellent choice," he said to my father instead, presenting the bottle with practiced grace before pouring. "We're celebrating an engagement," my father announced unnecessarily, clearly hoping for special treatment. "Congratulations," David replied smoothly. "The Grand Bistro is honored to host such a special occasion." "I'm surprised you managed a reservation," I said innocently. "I've heard it's quite difficult." Brandon leaned forward. "I know people," he said with a wink so smug I had to stop myself from rolling my eyes. I bit my tongue. The client was likely Mr. Stevens, one of our regular investors who sometimes asks for tables for business partners. I made a mental note to speak with him about Brandon. "Well, aren't you clever?" I murmured, raising my champagne glass. "To Chloe and Brandon," my father declared, "a perfect match and a brilliant future." We clinked glasses, and I took a small sip, noting that the champagne was served at the exact temperature I had trained my staff to keep. "So," my mother began, setting down her glass and focusing on me, "tell us what you've been doing these past few years. You've been so mysterious." The table's focus shifted to me, 5 pairs of eyes judging, ready to criticize. "I've been working in food," I said simply, "learning, growing." "Still with that cooking phase?" Chloe sighed as if I'd admitted to a bad habit. "I thought surely by now you'd have moved on to something more serious." "Not everyone can handle the corporate path," Ethan added, managing to make his defense sound like a criticism. Brandon looked confused. "What exactly do you do?" "Line cook, catering, various roles," I answered vaguely. "I've worn many hats." "Well, we're just glad you're managing to support yourself," my mother said with a fake kindness I knew so well. "Though we've always said our door is open if things get too challenging." I noticed Lisa, one of our most experienced servers, approaching with the amuse-bouche, a small ball of pressed watermelon topped with fermented black garlic and a tiny green leaf I had gotten from a special city farm. "Compliments of the kitchen," she announced, carefully placing one before each diner. Her eyes met mine briefly, a flash of loyalty before she went back to being professional. "Is this all?" Chloe asked, looking at the single bite with disappointment. "I'm starving." "It's an amuse-bouche," I explained, "a palate opener. The meal hasn't actually started yet." "I know what an amuse-bouche is, Bella," she snapped. "I'm not uncultured just because I chose law instead of playing with food." I watched as they each tasted my creation. My mother took the smallest possible bite, always thinking about calories. My father popped the whole thing in his mouth, barely tasting it. Ethan and Sarah at least seemed to appreciate it, while Brandon made a show of analyzing the flavors like a wine expert, using words that made no sense for food. Only Chloe left hers untouched. "I don't do raw garlic," she declared. Though the black garlic was far from raw, it had been fermented for 60 days in a temperature-controlled place, a process I had perfected after 3 years of trying. As our server cleared the plates, I saw the disappointment in her eyes at Chloe's untouched creation. In that moment, I felt protective, not of myself, but of my staff, who took such pride in our work. I had built the Grand Bistro not just as a restaurant, but as a kind of family, one bound by shared passion rather than blood. The evening was just beginning, but already I could feel the old patterns settling in. I was the outsider, the one who had chosen the wrong path, whose choices needed explaining. But unlike the Bella of 5 years ago, I now sat at this table with a secret strength, one that would soon turn this whole situation upside down. "So tell us about the wedding plans," I said, deliberately shifting attention back to Chloe as our first course arrived. A delicate mix of heirloom tomatoes, homemade ricotta, and basil oil that had taken me months to perfect. Chloe brightened immediately. "We've booked St. Mary's Church, of course, reception at the plaza for 400 guests, though Mother thinks we should cut it to 350. "The guest list is getting too big," my mother interrupted. "The Smith-Joneses aren't speaking to the Browns since that unfortunate yacht incident, so we can't seat them in the same section." I tried not to smile. The seriousness with which they discussed these social calculations never stopped amazing me. 400 seems too much, I ventured, taking a bite of the tomato dish. Brandon leaned forward. "It's networking, not just a party. Half those invitations are investments in relationships." "Precisely," my father agreed. "Brandon understands the social capital aspect. A wedding of this level opens doors." "And what about you, Bella?" Chloe asked, her tones suddenly sharp. "Any prospects on your horizon? Or are you still too busy with your cooking?" I noticed she had barely touched her food, pushing the heirloom tomatoes around her plate with clear disinterest. "I'm focused on my career right now," I answered simply. "Career?" Ethan repeated with a small laugh. "Is that what we're calling it?" My mother jumped in. "Bella, dear, surely by 29 you're thinking about settling down. There's that lovely son of Mrs. Davis. He's in hospital administration, I believe. Very stable." "I'm not looking to be set up, Mother." "Well, your options will get more limited with each passing year," she insisted, "especially in your situation." Before I could respond, our server appeared to clear the first course. I'd barely tasted my own creation, too tense to properly enjoy it. "Is there a problem with the dish?" Lisa asked Chloe, noticing her nearly full plate. "Too acidic," Chloe replied dismissively, "and the tomatoes could have been riper." I bit my tongue. Those tomatoes had been picked at their best that very morning from a farm upstate that grew specifically for us. "I'm so sorry to hear that," Lisa said with practiced politeness. "I'll be sure to inform the kitchen." The second course arrived, seared scallops with a brown butter sauce and pickled ramps, a spring special I was particularly proud of. As the plates were set down, I watched my family's reactions. "Now this looks promising," my father declared, cutting into his scallop with his fork. Brandon swirled his wine, a white wine I had personally chosen to go with this course. Decent wine list here, not amazing, but okay. Our wine expert David, overhearing this as he passed, shot me a quick glance. I gave him a subtle smile. David had been hired from a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Paris and had turned down offers from places all over the world to work with me. "So, Bella," Sarah began, clearly trying to include me, "Ethan mentioned you're working in food, but you never really said what exactly you do." Before I could answer, Chloe cut in. "She's probably hostessing somewhere, right, Bella? Using that business degree to seat people and hand out menus." "Actually," I started. "No shame in that," my father interrupted. "Everyone has to start somewhere, though after 5 years, I would have expected some advancement." "I've advanced," I said quietly. "Into what? Assistant manager at a fast food place?" Chloe laughed at her own joke. "Chloe," Ethan warned, showing a rare moment of defense. "What? I'm just being realistic. She chose to give up her education for this passion project. Actions have consequences." I took a sip of wine, letting the familiar taste calm me. "And how is law treating you, Chloe? Still at a big law firm?" Her expression tightened. "I'm between positions at the moment, actually taking time to plan the wedding." "She was working too many hours," Brandon interrupted. I told her, "My wife doesn't need to kill herself at some firm. Once we're married, she can do charity work like my mother." I noticed a flash of something, resentment, frustration, in Chloe's eyes before she smoothed her expression back to calm agreement. The third course arrived, a pasta dish with hand-rolled tagliatelle, spring peas, pancetta, and mint, one of our signature dishes that had been featured in Food and Wine. "The portion size here is ridiculous," my mother commented, looking at the beautifully plated pasta. "All this expense for 3 bites." "It's about quality over quantity, Mother," I replied. "The tasting menu is designed to take you through many flavors and textures." "In my day, restaurants gave you a proper meal for your money," my father grumbled. "This new fancy food is just a way to charge more for less food." I watched as Brandon cut into his pasta rather than twirling it, breaking the delicate strands I had rolled by hand that morning. So, how exactly are you affording a place like this on a food service salary? Chloe asked bluntly. This is one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. I felt all eyes turn to me. I manage my money carefully, I replied. Oh, please, Chloe scoffed. A dinner here costs more than you probably make in a day. Who are you dating? Is he paying for this? I'm not dating anyone, I said evenly. Then how can you possibly afford this place? She pressed. Are you in debt, maxing out credit cards to keep up appearances? Chloe, Ethan warned again, looking uncomfortable. No, I want to know, she insisted. We all changed our plans for this dinner that she suggested at one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Either she's being financially irresponsible or she's not being honest about her situation. The fourth course arrived, a perfectly cooked duck breast with cherry sauce and farro. Chef Maria, who ran the kitchen when I wasn't there, had made it perfectly. This duck is undercooked, Brandon announced after one bite. I looked at his plate. The duck was a perfect medium rare, exactly as it should be. It's meant to be served that way, I explained. Medium rare is the best temperature for duck breast. I prefer my meat well done, he declared, waving for a server. When Lisa approached, he spoke without looking at her. This is raw. Take it back and cook it properly. I saw the flash of annoyance in Lisa's eyes, quickly hidden by professional courtesy. Of course, sir. My apologies. As she took his plate, I caught her eye and gave a slight nod. She would know to have the kitchen prepare a new breast rather than ruining the existing one by overcooking it. Really, Bella? My mother said, once Lisa had gone. You still haven't answered Chloe's question. How are you affording this dinner? The tension at the table was clear now. I could feel the familiar tightness in my chest. The same feeling I'd had during countless family dinners growing up. The sense of being trapped, judged, and found lacking before I'd even had a chance to speak. But I wasn't that same insecure young woman anymore. I had built something I was proud of, something that was entirely mine. For a moment, I thought about telling them everything right then, watching their faces change as they realized whose restaurant they were sitting in, whose food they had been criticizing so carelessly. Before I could decide, Brandon's overcooked duck returned, now lacking all the tenderness and flavor it had originally possessed. Much better, he declared after one bite, though I could see from across the table that it was now dry and tough. My father signaled for the wine list again. Let's order another bottle, something more impressive this time. As David approached with the leather-bound list, my father made a show of looking at it, finally pointing to one of our most expensive options, a Bordeaux priced at over $800. This one should be adequate, he declared. I knew that bottle well. I had chosen it during a trip to France last year, meeting with the winemaker personally. It was spectacular, but completely wrong for the current course and the ones to follow. May I suggest something that might pair better with the remaining dishes? I ventured. My father waved me off. I think I know my wines, Bella. David caught my eye, silently asking for direction. I gave him a small nod. Let my father have his way. This wasn't the battle to fight. As the evening went on through the final savory course and into dessert, a deconstructed lemon tart that was one of my personal favorites, the criticisms continued. Every dish met with some complaint. Every attempt I made to join the conversation was somehow twisted into proof of my failure. By the time coffee was served, I felt emotionally drained. The double burden of dealing with my family's condescension while watching them carelessly criticize my life's work was becoming too much. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and looking forward to, the check. Lucas approached with the black leather folder containing the bill, placing it quietly in the center of the table. My father reached for it immediately, a reflex of his role as head of the family. But Brandon stopped him. Please, Robert, allow me, he said, with the practiced smoothness of someone who has turned even generosity into a power move. My father made the expected small protest before agreeing. I watched as Brandon opened the folder, his expression shifting from a confident smile to barely hidden shock as he saw the total. Is there a problem? My father asked, noticing the change. No, Brandon recovered quickly, just confirming the calculation. I knew exactly what he was looking at. A dinner for seven with expensive wine pairings, special off-menu requests, and that $800 Bordeaux would easily be over $3,000. Not outrageous for a restaurant of the Grand Bistro's quality, but certainly a statement. He reached for his wallet, taking out a black credit card slowly, making sure everyone noticed it. Chloe, perhaps sensing his discomfort, chose that moment to go back to her earlier questioning. "So, Bella," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "you never did explain how you're managing to contribute to this extravagant dinner. We wouldn't want you stretching yourself financially on our account." All eyes turned to me again. I could feel the familiar pattern taking hold. Chloe the successful one, me the struggling disappointment. "I can cover my portion," I said simply. "Can you, though?" she pressed, leaning forward. "Because we all know what food service pays. Can you even afford this place?" The table fell silent. The question hung in the air, so deliberately insulting that even my parents looked uncomfortable. "Chloe," my mother murmured, "perhaps this isn't—" "No, I want to know," Chloe insisted, eyes locked on mine. "We've spent the entire evening pretending that everything's fine, that Bella's choice to throw away her education hasn't left her struggling. I think we deserve some honesty." I felt a hot flush rising from my chest to my face. 5 years of distance, of building my own life and success, and nothing had changed. I was still the family disappointment, still being asked to explain my existence. Brandon, perhaps seeing a chance to regain control after the check shock, joined in. "If you need help with your portion, just say so. No shame in that." "I don't need help," I said, my voice tight. "Then how exactly are you paying for this?" Chloe demanded. "A meal here costs more than you probably make in a week." I opened my mouth to respond, to finally reveal everything, when Brandon suddenly frowned at the bill. "Wait, there's a mistake here," he announced. "They've only charged us for the wines, not the food." He signaled sharply for Lucas. "Excuse me, there's an error on our check." Lucas approached our table with perfect timing, as though he'd been waiting for this moment. In reality, he probably had been. My staff knew me well enough to be watching this drama unfold. "Is there a problem, sir?" he asked. "Yes, you've only charged us for the beverages, not the meal," Brandon said, pointing at the bill. Lucas looked at the check, then at me, his expression questioning. In that moment, I made my decision. The act had gone on long enough. I gave Lucas a slight nod. "There's no error, sir," Lucas said smoothly. "The dinner portion has been taken care of." "By whom?" my father asked, frowning. Lucas turned to me, his professional manner giving way to a warm smile. "Welcome back, Miss Bella. Your usual table is ready for your meeting with the investors. Would you like me to handle the situation first?" The silence that fell over the table was complete. 6 pairs of eyes turned to me in various stages of confusion and disbelief. "Thank you, Lucas," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. "Yes, please close out Mr. Thompson's beverage tab. The rest is on the house, as usual." "Very good, Miss Bella," he replied, taking the folder from Brandon's now loose grip. "Chef Maria mentioned she'd like your opinion on the new spring menu items when you have a moment." "I'll stop by the kitchen before my meeting," I assured him. As Lucas left, I finally looked directly at my family. Their expressions ranged from confusion to shock to the first hint of understanding. "What? What is happening?" my mother finally managed. I took a deep breath. The moment I had both dreaded and secretly looked forward to for 5 years had arrived. "Welcome to the Grand Bistro," I said simply. "My restaurant." The silence stretched for what felt like forever. My father was the first to recover, his expression shifting from confusion to calculation. "Your restaurant?" he repeated carefully. "You work here?" "No, father," I clarified, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "I own the Grand Bistro. I'm the executive chef and sole proprietor." "That's impossible," Chloe blurted. "This is one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. It's been featured in major magazines." "Yes," I agreed. Food and Wine last month, Bon Appetit before that. The New York Times gave us 4 stars in their review last year. Brandon was staring at me as though I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. But you said you worked in food." You were vague about everything because I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I was struggling, I explained, and you've all made that abundantly clear tonight. My mother's hand fluttered to her pearls, her usual gesture when socially upset. Darling, why wouldn't you tell us about this achievement? The way she emphasized achievement spoke volumes. Success made my choices acceptable in a way passion alone never could. Would you like the full story? I asked, looking around the table. Without waiting for an answer, I continued. After I left 5 years ago, I moved to the city with what little savings I had. I rented a tiny room in an apartment with 3 roommates in Queens. For the first year, I worked 3 jobs. Prep cook at a small cafe from 5 a.m. to noon, line cook at a midtown restaurant from 1 to 10 p.m., and weekend shifts at a bakery. I took a sip of water, noticing their uncomfortable expressions. I slept 4 hours a night. I had blisters and burns all over my arms. I studied cooking techniques constantly in my rare free moments. Chef Antoine, who had first encouraged me to pursue culinary arts, took me under his wing. I became his second-in-command chef within 18 months. Ethan was watching me with what seemed like real interest. Sarah looked impressed. My parents seemed frozen, thinking things over. 2.5 years ago, I was working a private event at Antoine's restaurant. A guest, Mr. David Green of Green Capital, tried my special dish and asked to meet the chef. He was surprised to find someone so young had created what he called the most innovative dish he'd tasted in years. I gestured around us. David became my first investor. We found this space, which was a failed nightclub at the time. I developed the idea, designed the menu, hired the staff, oversaw every detail from the light fixtures to the custom plates. But the cost, my father said, his mind still stuck on the money. A restaurant of this quality in this location, it must have cost millions. 3.4 million for the initial investment, I confirmed. David brought in 2 other investors. We opened to immediate praise, partly due to Antoine's support and connections in the industry. 6 months in, we were making a profit. 3 months after that, I used the restaurant's success to get a loan and buy out my investors. I've been the sole owner for over a year now. That's why you suggested we meet here, Chloe realized, her voice small. You knew all along. Actually, no, I corrected her. Sarah chose this restaurant. Isn't that right, Sarah? All eyes turned to Ethan's wife, who blushed deeply. I had no idea, Bella. The concierge at Ethan's firm recommended it as the most impressive new restaurant in the city. I swear I didn't know it was yours. Of course you didn't, I assured her. No one in the family knew. That was on purpose on my part. But why keep it secret? My mother pressed. We're your family. We would have been proud. I couldn't help the sharp laugh that escaped me. Would you? The same family who called cooking servant's work? Who cut me off completely when I chose culinary school? Who, just minutes ago, were making rude comments about my life choices? My father cleared his throat. Now, Bella, that's unfair. We were concerned about your stability, your future. If we'd known you had this kind of business smarts. That's exactly my point, I interrupted. You couldn't respect my passion alone. It only has value to you now that it comes with success and status. At that moment, Chef Maria approached our table. In her crisp white uniform with Maria Rodriguez, Chef de Cuisine, embroidered on the chest, she made an impressive figure. Sorry to interrupt, Bella, she said, but the Johnson party has arrived for their tasting, and the magazine wants to confirm your interview for next week's feature. Also, your publisher called about the cookbook cover design. I nodded. Thank you, Maria. Please tell them I'll be there shortly. As Maria left, I noticed the growing amazement on my family's faces. Cookbook, Chloe echoed. Coming out this fall with a big publisher, I confirmed. 120 recipes with personal stories. Bella, my mother began, her voice taking on the sweet tone she used when trying to handle a social situation. This is all so impressive. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We could have helped, supported you. The way you supported me when I needed it most? I asked quietly. By cutting me off completely? We thought it was a phase, my father protested. How are we to know you had this level of entrepreneurial spirit? You've clearly inherited my business sense. I felt a flash of anger at his attempt to take credit for my success. I built this myself, I said firmly, without your connections, your money, or your support. Brandon, who had been suspiciously quiet, suddenly perked up. A cookbook deal? That must come with a big advance. And this place, he gestured around with appreciation, his earlier criticisms forgotten, it must make a lot of money. Do you have plans for expansion? Perhaps a restaurant group? I have some contacts in hospitality investment who might be interested. I couldn't help but laugh at how obvious his shift was, from looking down on me to seeing a business opportunity. I'm doing quite well with my current advisors, but thank you, I said. Chloe shot him a look of irritation before turning back to me. So, all this time, while I thought you were struggling, you were actually succeeding, building all this? Yes, I said simply. And tonight, she continued, her voice hardening, you let us sit here criticizing your food, your wine list, your portion sizes, all while knowing it was yours. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I was still the family failure, I explained, and now I know. That seems manipulative, she snapped, but I could see the embarrassment behind her anger. More manipulative than asking how I could afford to eat here, then suggesting I must be in debt or dating someone wealthy to afford a meal at this table, I countered. You weren't concerned about me, Chloe. You were enjoying what you thought was your superiority. The restaurant had gradually emptied as we talked, the evening service winding down. David approached with a bottle. Your special reserve brandy, Miss Bella, he said, for your investors' meeting, and Chef Maria says the kitchen is ready whenever you are. Thank you, David, I replied. Please let Maria know I'll be there in 10 minutes. As he left, I turned back to my stunned family. I have a business to run, I said, rising from my seat. Thank you for coming this evening. Bella, wait, my mother said quickly. Don't leave like this. We should celebrate your success. Perhaps we could all have brunch this weekend? Catch up properly. I looked at her, seeing for the first time not the intimidating figure of my childhood, but simply a woman trying to save her pride and position. I'll think about it, I said, but right now I have investors waiting and a kitchen to oversee. As I turned to leave, Ethan stood up. Bella, he said, his voice quieter than the others. For what it's worth, this is incredible. What you've built here, it's remarkable. I'm sorry for not supporting you sooner. Of all the reactions, his felt the most genuine. I gave him a small nod of acknowledgement before walking away from the table where I had just changed the dynamics of my family forever. I had barely made it 10 steps when I heard the click of heels behind me. Turning, I found my mother hurrying to catch up, her perfectly composed facade beginning to crack. Bella, please, she said, lowering her voice. You can't just drop this revelation and walk away. We need to talk about this. I glanced toward the private dining room where my actual investors, a group discussing funding my second restaurant idea, were waiting. I have a meeting, Mother. Postpone it, she insisted. This is family. Family hasn't been a priority for you in 5 years, I replied, keeping my voice steady. My business commitments don't suddenly become optional because you finally decided my career is worthy of your attention. The rest of the family had followed her, creating an awkward group near the bar area. My father looked distinctly uncomfortable, not used to not being in control of a situation. Chloe's expression wavered between resentment and something that might have been respect. Perhaps we could continue this conversation tomorrow, my father suggested, in his problem-solving business tone. Dinner at our place. We have much to discuss, including how we might help you expand, Brandon added eagerly. My firm specializes in... I don't need your help, I interrupted firmly. I didn't build this place to finally win your approval. I built it because this is what I love, what I'm good at. The fact that it's successful doesn't suddenly make my passion more valid than it was 5 years ago. No one is saying that, darling, my mother backpedaled. We're simply proud of what you've accomplished. Are you proud, Mother, or are you relieved that my choices no longer embarrass you socially? Her flinch told me I'd hit close to home. That's unfair, my father interrupted. We've always wanted what's best for you. No, I corrected him. You wanted what fit your vision for me. There's a difference. Maria appeared at my side, her presence a welcome support. The West Group is asking if you'll be joining them soon, she said quietly. 5 minutes, I promised her. As Maria nodded and stepped away, I turned back to my family. I need to go. Bella, Chloe stepped forward, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. I owe you an apology. The things I said tonight, they were unkind. They were honest, I replied. That's the good thing about this evening. I got to see exactly how you all view me when you think I'm struggling. That's not fair, Ethan said, joining the conversation. People make judgments based on the information they have. We didn't know. You didn't know I was successful, I clarified. But you didn't know I was pursuing something I loved. That should have been enough for my family to show basic respect. A heavy silence fell over the group. You're right, my father finally said, surprising me. We should have supported your passion regardless of its outcome. Coming from him, this admission was important. Robert Miller didn't admit mistakes easily. Where do we go from here? My mother asked, genuine uncertainty in her voice. Another rare moment. I took a deep breath, thinking about the question. Despite everything, these people were my family. The hurt they'd caused was real, but so was our shared history. Complete separation had never been my goal, just enough distance to build my own life without their judgment clouding my decisions. I don't know yet, I answered honestly, but tonight has made one thing clear. If we're going to have any relationship moving forward, it needs to be on different terms. I'm not the family failure seeking redemption. I'm a successful chef and business owner who deserves the same respect you'd give any other professional. Of course, my father agreed, quickly. And that means no more comments about my life choices, no more unwanted career advice, and absolutely no attempts to network through my restaurant, I added with a pointed look at Brandon, who had the grace to look embarrassed. About Chloe's wedding, my mother began tentatively. What about it? I asked. We'd still like you to be there, Chloe said, her voice softening, as my sister, not as whatever we thought you were before tonight. I looked at her, trying to see past the years of competition and judgment. Despite everything, there had been good times, too. Secrets shared as children, supporting each other through our first heartbreaks, inside jokes no one else understood. I'll be there, I promised. Then, after a moment's thought, I added, and if you'd like, I could host a dinner for the wedding party here at the Grand Bistro, as my gift. Chloe's eyes widened. You would do that? After how we've treated you? You're still my sister, I said simply. But to be clear, this isn't me seeking your approval. It's me offering something I'm proud of on my own terms. I understand, she said quietly, and I would be honored. A genuine smile, the first of the evening, passed between us. Now, I really do need to go, I said, gesturing toward the private dining room. Of course, my father nodded, your business comes first. Not always, I corrected him, but tonight, yes. As they gathered their things to leave, I added, I'm free for brunch on Sunday. Not at your club, though. There's a small place in the East Village I think you should experience. We'll be there, my mother promised, looking relieved at this small opening. I watched them leave the restaurant, their perspectives forever changed. As the door closed behind them, I let out a long breath, feeling oddly lighter. Maria approached again. Everything okay getting there? Family is complicated, I replied. Tell me about it, she laughed. My mother still introduces me as her daughter who works at a restaurant, like I'm a teenage waitress at a diner. I smiled, grateful for her understanding. Let's go talk spring menu. I have some new ideas I'm excited about. As we walked toward the kitchen, my safe place, my achievement, my true home, I realized that the most important revelation of the evening wasn't showing my family what I'd built. It was fully recognizing it myself. I had created this success on my own terms, regardless of their approval, and that knowledge was worth more than any validation they could ever offer. 2 weeks passed like a whirlwind. Spring menu planning, meetings with my publisher about the cookbook layout, and early talks about a possible second location kept me happily busy. But thoughts of that family dinner remained, popping up in quiet moments, asking for reflection. Sunday brunch had gone surprisingly well. I'd taken my family to the Corner Cafe, a small, hidden gem run by a former colleague from my early days working the line. My parents had been visibly uncomfortable at first with the mismatched chairs and artsy walls, but the food, simple yet perfectly made, had won them over. I never knew simple eggs could taste like this, my father had admitted, wiping up the last of his shakshuka with homemade sourdough. Small steps, not a complete change, but an opening. Now sitting at my usual table after closing time, I watched the staff finish their last duties. Lisa was counting the register while humming softly. Lucas and David were discussing wine pairings for tomorrow's private event. Maria had left an hour ago after we'd finished the spring menu changes. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "Wedding planning nightmare. Florists just doubled their quote. Any chance you're free for coffee tomorrow? Could use some straight talk from someone who won't just tell me what I want to hear." I smiled slightly at this unexpected request for my opinion. Another small step. I texted back confirming a time and place. The relationship with my family was changing into something I couldn't have predicted. Not the full acceptance I might have once wanted, but something potentially more valuable. A measured respect between adults with different values and paths. My mother had called 3 times in the past 2 weeks, her usual formal manner softening into real questions about my work. My father had sent an article about female chefs breaking barriers in the industry, a silent acknowledgement that he was trying to understand my world. Even Ethan had reached out, asking if he could bring his children to see the kitchen sometime. "I want them to know they have options," he'd said, "that success doesn't have to look the same for everyone." These were fragile beginnings, not the dramatic reunion of a Hollywood movie. Real healing, I was learning, happens in quiet moments and small gestures, in the gradual rewriting of old patterns. The most important change, though, wasn't in my family's view of me, but in how I had finally stopped measuring my worth through their eyes. The approval I had once desperately sought from them now felt strangely unnecessary. I had proven myself not to them, but to myself. This realization had spread through other areas of my life as well. I'd launched a mentorship program for young chefs from difficult backgrounds, offering them the guidance and opportunity I had fought so hard to find. These were fragile beginnings, not the dramatic reunion of a Hollywood movie. Real healing, I was learning, happens in quiet moments and small gestures, in the gradual rewriting of old patterns. The most important change, though, wasn't in my family's view of me, but in how I had finally stopped measuring my worth through their eyes. The approval I had once desperately sought from them now felt strangely unnecessary. I had proven myself not to them, but to myself. This realization had spread through other areas of my life as well. I'd launched a mentorship program for young chefs from difficult backgrounds, offering them the guidance and opportunity I had fought so hard to find. Every Saturday morning, the Grand Bistro kitchen turned into a classroom for 8 aspiring chefs who reminded me of my younger self, passionate, determined, needing only someone who believed in their potential. One of them, Maya, had shown such promise that I'd offered her an apprenticeship. Watching her confidence grow with each new skill mastered brought a satisfaction different from any professional award I'd received. "Chef?" Lisa's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "We're all set for closing. Anything else you need before we head out?" "No, thank you," I smiled. "You all did amazing work tonight." As the staff left, calling their goodnights, I remained at my table, notebook open to a blank page. I'd been trying to write the introduction to my cookbook, struggling to find words that captured my journey. In the quiet of the empty restaurant, I finally began to write. Food has always been my truest language. When words failed, I spoke through flavors. When paths seemed unclear, I followed my taste. The dishes in this book are more than recipes. They're chapters of a life lived in pursuit of being true to myself rather than seeking approval. 5 years ago, I stood at a crossroads between what was expected of me and my passion. Choosing the latter cost me a lot at first, but ultimately led to the richest feast I could have imagined. Not just in professional success, but in the discovery that true wealth isn't measured by what others think or by material things, but by the courage to honor your own voice, even when it whispers against the shouts of doubt. I set down my pen, the words finally flowing freely. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a difficult vendor negotiation, Chloe's wedding planning drama, finishing the cookbook introduction. But tonight, in this moment of quiet thought, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been nights of being so tired I'd fallen asleep in kitchen corners during rare breaks, burns and cuts that left scars still visible on my hands, moments of doubt so strong I'd questioned everything. But I had kept going. Not because I needed to prove my worth to others, but because I couldn't imagine living any other way. In choosing to be authentic over seeking approval, I'd found something more valuable than either success or family validation. I'd found myself. Have you ever had to choose between meeting others' expectations and following your own heart? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it connected with you, subscribe for more true stories of resilience and triumph, and share with someone who might need a reminder that the most important approval comes from within. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, the most meaningful success is measured not by others' standards, but by the joy and purpose you find along your own path.